Before we get into it, if you're new here, like and subscribe right now and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you've been here since part 1, welcome back. You already know what Sindy survived. But surviving Fury was only the beginning. Because the moment she took Kim Sun's hand and said show me everything, she stepped into a world where the enemies are quieter, the danger is older, and the stakes are no longer just her life. They are the empire itself. Let's go. The first thing Sindy learned about the Syndicate was that it had a language. Not Korean, though she was learning that too, slowly, in the mornings before Kim Sun woke, using an app she'd downloaded with the quiet determination she applied to everything she decided to master. The language she meant was subtler. It lived in the way certain men stood when Kim Sun entered a room, the precise angle of deference, the eyes that dropped a half-second too late. It lived in the phone calls that ended the moment she walked in, not with guilt but with protocol. It lived in the difference between the men who acknowledged her and the men who looked just slightly past her, as if she were a beautiful piece of furniture that had not yet been assigned a room. Kim Sun had begun her education the morning after she took his hand at the window. He had walked her down to the surveillance room, her code still worked, he had not changed it, and for 3 hours he had sat beside her at the center console and explained, in the same methodical way he did everything, the architecture of what he had built. The Korean Syndicate had 17 operational branches across the eastern seaboard. It controlled import logistics through 4 port authorities, held silent ownership in 11 legitimate corporations, and maintained what Kim Sun called arrangements with a network of city officials, law enforcement personnel, and federal contacts that Sindy had the wisdom not to ask him to name. It was not a criminal enterprise, he explained, in the way that word conjured images of chaos and brutality. It was order. Expensive, ruthless, and precisely maintained order in spaces where the law either could not reach or had chosen not to look. And the violence? She had asked, because she was done not asking. Violence, he said, is what happens when the order breaks down. My job is to make sure it doesn't. And when it does? He had looked at her steadily. Then I am what fixes it. She had sat with that. She was still sitting with it 3 weeks later when the order, for the first time since she had entered this world, began to break down. It started with a name. Baek Joon. She heard the name first from Tai, Kim Sun's most senior lieutenant, a lean, precise man in his late 30s who had treated Sindy with careful, professional courtesy since the day she moved into the estate. Tai was not warm. He was not cold. He was the human equivalent of a locked room that was nonetheless very well maintained. She was crossing the lower hallway when she heard him on the phone, voice dropped to the register men used when they believed they were alone. She caught 2 things before she rounded the corner and made enough noise to announce herself. Baek Joon and his already in the city. That evening she asked Kim Sun about it directly. The stillness that moved through him was brief but seismic. Where did you hear that name? He asked. Does it matter? He set down the folder he'd been reviewing and looked at her fully. Baek Joon, he said, as if tasting something he had hoped not to encounter again, is the reason the Syndicate has the shape it has. He built the original structure, before me. I took it from him when I was 29 years old. Took it how? The only way those things get taken, he said. The silence that followed answered the rest of the question. I had his word, Kim Sun continued, that he would stay in Seoul. We had an arrangement. Mutually beneficial. He kept his network in Asia. I kept mine here. And now he's in the city, Sindy said. Kim Sun's jaw tightened. Yes. What does he want? He looked at her, and she saw something she had not seen in him before, not fear, because she was no longer sure Kim Sun was physiologically capable of fear in the ordinary sense, but something that recognized the weight of what was coming. He wants what men like Baek always want, he said quietly. What was taken from him? And he has spent 11 years deciding how to take it back. Sindy thought about the 42 screens. The 17 branches. The arrangements and the ports and the corporations and the city map with its red nodes. He wants the Syndicate, she said. Yes. And us. Where do we fall in what he wants? Kim Sun's eyes met hers, and in them she saw the answer before he gave it. You, he said carefully, are the clearest way to get to me. The first move Baek made was elegant, and Sindy almost missed it entirely. It came not through violence or threat but through a woman named Yuna, who arrived at the estate on a Tuesday morning claiming to be a representative of a Seoul-based investment firm interested in a property consultation with Kim's son. She was poised and beautifully dressed, and she spoke with the kind of fluent corporate English that opened doors before people thought to check credentials. The estate's front staff turned her away. Kim's son did not take unscheduled meetings at the residence, and reported the visit to Tai, who reported it to Kim's son, who said nothing for a long moment and then said, "Pull everything on Yuna Seo. Tonight." Sindy was in the room when he said it. "You know her." "I knew her," he corrected. 11 years ago she was Baek's most trusted courier. The fact that she came here in person, to this address, means Baek wanted me to know she's here. It's not a visit. It's a signal." "What kind of signal?" "That he knows more about my life than I am comfortable with." He paused. "Including you." That night, Sindy sat in the surveillance room alone for the first time since Kim's son had shown her the system. She had been studying it in the intervening weeks, the feeds, the node structure, the way information moved through the network. She was not yet fluent in it, but she was no longer illiterate. She pulled the feed from the front gate camera, rewound it to Yuna's arrival, watched the woman's face as she spoke to the gate staff, composed, professional. But at the moment of being turned away, for exactly 1 second, Yuna looked directly into the camera above the gate. Not at the gate. At the camera. She knew exactly where it was. Sindy screenshot the frame and left it on the console for Kim's son to find. He found it at midnight. He came to where she was reading in bed, and he stood in the doorway and he looked at her with an expression that was, she was beginning to recognize, his version of being moved. "You caught that," he said. "She wanted you to know she'd been here," Sindy said. "But she also wanted you to know she'd looked. That she sees your system. That Baek has been studying it." "Yes." "So the question," Sindy said, setting down her book, "is what does she not know yet? What is Baek missing that we can use?" Kim's son was quiet for a moment. And then, for the second time, the corner of his mouth moved in that way. "You," he said softly. "He doesn't know what you are yet. He thinks you're a vulnerability." Sindy held his gaze. "Then let's let him keep thinking that. If you're still with me, and I know you are, hit that like button right now and subscribe if you haven't already. Comment below where you're watching from, because this community is global and I want to know every corner of the world that's riding with Sindy right now. We are just getting to the good part." The traitor revealed himself on a Friday. Kim's son had always known, in the abstract way that experienced men know things they cannot yet prove, that Baek's information was too precise to be coming from external surveillance alone. The feed locations. The estate address. Yuna knowing the camera position. These were details that lived inside the organization. It was Sindy who found him. She had been cross-referencing the internal communication logs, something Kim's son had given her access to as part of her ongoing education, and she noticed a pattern not in what was being said, but in the timing of what went quiet. Twice in the past 3 weeks, internal movement alerts had experienced 90-second gaps. Brief. Easily attributed to system latency. But they occurred, both times, within 20 minutes of a meeting between Kim's son and his senior team. 90 seconds was enough time to make a call. She traced the gap to a single console access point. She ran the access ID. She sat very still for a moment when the name came back. Tai. She did not go to Kim's son immediately. She went back through the logs a second time, then a third, because Tai had been with Kim's son for 11 years and she was not going to bring something like this to her husband without being certain. On the fourth pass she found the confirmation, a deleted access record, partially overwritten but recoverable if you knew what you were looking at, time-stamped the night before Yuna's visit to the gate. She printed it. She put it in a folder. She went downstairs and found Kim's son in his study. She set the folder on his desk and sat across from him and watched him read it. The silence that followed was the longest she had ever sat through in this house. When he looked up, his face was composed with the particular effort of a man who had just had something very old broken. 11 years, he said. Not to her. To the air. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. He looked at her then, really looked, the way he did in the moments that mattered, and she saw the grief move through him clean and fast, the way only practiced grief can move. "How long did it take you to be certain?" he asked. "4 passes through the logs," she said. "About 2 hours." He nodded slowly. He closed the folder. "You may have just saved the syndicate," he said quietly. "I saved us," she corrected. "The syndicate is a benefit." Something in his chest seemed to release. He stood, came around the desk, and did something he rarely did in rooms that weren't their bedroom. He pulled her into him, both arms, the full weight of his gratitude and his grief together, and held on. She let him. Tai was handled the way Kim Sun handled everything. Quietly, completely, and without spectacle. He did not involve Sindy in that part. She did not ask him to. There were still rooms in this life she was not ready to enter, and she had made a private agreement with herself to know the difference between the doors she needed to open and the ones she could afford to leave closed. What she did involve herself in was the response to Baek. Because Baek Joon, now aware that his inside access had been severed and that Kim Sun knew his hand, made his second move within 48 hours, and this one was not elegant. 3 of Kim Sun's branch managers received threats simultaneously. Not vague ones. Specific, detailed, personal threats that named family members and addresses and school schedules, the kind of information that said, "I have been watching longer than you knew, and I can reach further than you think." Kim Sun called his senior team together, the remaining members, reorganized, and vetted in the 48 hours since Tai, and laid out the situation with the clinical directness Sindy had come to understand was his form of respect. No sugarcoating. No false reassurance. The full picture, and then the plan. Sindy sat at the table. Nobody questioned her presence. That, she understood, was its own kind of statement. One Kim Sun had made quietly and in advance, in the way he made all his important decisions. When the operational response was laid out, Sindy spoke once. "His trying to make you reactive. Every move he's made, Una at the gate, the threats to the branch managers, it's pressure designed to make you come at him before you're positioned. Don't." The room was quiet. Kim Sun looked at her across the table. "She's right," he said. "We don't move until we're ready. And we're not ready yet." "Then what do we do in the meantime?" one of the managers asked. "We let him think the pressure is working," Sindy said. "We give him something to watch. Something that looks like scrambling. And while he's watching that..." She looked at Kim Sun. "We move on what he actually cares about," he finished. "Which is?" the manager pressed. "The ports," Kim Sun said. "Baek's network runs on the import lines. He needs a foothold in this city's port authority to re-establish anything permanent. He doesn't have one yet. That's his gap." "Then we close it," Sindy said. "Before he gets there." The men around the table looked at each other. And then, one by one, they looked at her, not past her, not through her, and she understood that the furniture had just been assigned its room. Baek Joon made his first direct contact on a Wednesday evening. It came to Kim Sun's personal line, a number fewer than a dozen people in the world possessed, in the form of a voice message. 11 seconds long. "Kim Sun Ah. It has been a long time. I hear your wife is remarkable. I look forward to meeting her. Let's talk before this becomes something neither of us can control. You know how to reach me." Kim Sun played it once. Then he handed the phone to Sindy. She played it twice. She listened to the cadence of it, the deliberate use of the informal address, the mention of her design to provoke, the offer to talk framed as a de-escalation but structured as a warning. She had been learning this language, not just Korean, but the language of men who wielded power like a precision instrument. "He's scared," she said. Kim Sun raised an eyebrow. "Men who are winning don't offer to talk," she said. The port move worked. He's already feeling it, and we only closed 2 of the 3 access points. He called because he can see where this goes if we close the 3rd. He could also be pulling us into a conversation to buy time, Kim Sun said. He could, she agreed. So don't talk to him. She paused. I will. The silence in the room was absolute. No, Kim Sun said. One word. The full weight of every instinct he had. Kim Sun. Absolutely not. Listen to me. She turned to face him fully. He called you because he wants to remind you that you have something to lose. He thinks I'm the vulnerability. He thinks mentioning me rattles you, and it does, which is exactly why you cannot be the one in that room. You walk in there already compromised. And you. I walk in there as the thing he didn't expect, she said. A woman who already knows what she married, already chose it, and is not afraid of him. He looked at her for a long time. The longest he had ever taken to respond to anything she said. You will have 6 men within 20 feet of you at all times, he said finally. You will wear a wire. You will have a word, one word, and if you say it, the room changes immediately. No questions. Agreed. And Sindy. His voice dropped. If at any point. I know, she said softly. I'll say the word. He reached up and touched her face, brief, careful, the most unguarded he ever was, and then he stepped back and became the syndicate again. Tell him Wednesday. Baek Joon was not what she expected. She had built him in her imagination from the information available. Kim Sun's brief, careful descriptions, the 11-year gap, the precision of his moves, and she had expected someone cold. Someone architectural, like Kim Sun, but without whatever it was that made Kim Sun human in private. Instead she found a man in his mid-60s who stood when she entered the room, who gestured to the chair across from him with courtly composure, and who looked at her with the particular attention of someone who had been genuinely curious and was now genuinely reassessing. The room was a private dining space in a Korean restaurant in the financial district. Neutral territory, his suggestion, Kim Sun's vetting. 4 of her 6 guards were invisible. 2 were visible enough to make a point. Mrs. Kim, Baek said. His English was flawless and unhurried. I expected him to come himself. I know, she said, and sat down. That's why he didn't. The ghost of appreciation crossed Baek's face. You are not what the reports suggested. The reports were written by a man who didn't know me, she said. Tai saw what he expected to see. Baek was quiet for a moment. You found him. I found the gaps he left. Impressive, Baek said, and she believed he meant it, which made him more dangerous than if he hadn't. Then let me be direct with you, since it seems appropriate. I want the Eastern Port contracts returned to my network. In exchange, I leave this city. Permanently. Kim Sun keeps everything else. Sindy studied him. And if we decline? Then this becomes a longer conversation than either of us wants. We already closed 2 of your 3 access points, she said pleasantly. The 3rd closes Thursday. After that, the conversation you're referencing becomes one you cannot afford to have. So the question isn't what happens if we decline. She folded her hands on the table. The question is what you're actually offering us in exchange for walking away clean. Baek looked at her for a long, measuring moment. Kim Sun taught you well, he said. Kim Sun showed me the system, she said. I taught myself. Another silence. And then Baek Joon leaned back in his chair and did something she had not anticipated. He smiled. 1 contract, he said. Pier 14 only. 5-year term. After which it reverts entirely to the syndicate. 3 years, she said. And you give us the names of every contact Tai compromised before we found him. The smile stayed. You negotiate like someone who has been doing this for decades. I negotiate like someone who has nothing left to be afraid of, she said. Do we have a deal? Baek Joon considered her for exactly 10 seconds. We have a deal, he said. She was in the car before she let herself breathe. The wire was still warm against her ribs. Her hands, which had been perfectly still on the table across from Baek Joon, were shaking now with the delayed arrival of adrenaline, and she pressed them flat against her knees and breathed through it the way she had learned to breathe through hard things, steadily, completely, until the shaking stopped. Kim Sun was waiting at the estate. He had the surveillance room feed open. She could tell by the particular tension in his shoulders when she walked in, the evidence of a man who had watched every second of that meeting on a screen and had not moved from his chair once. He stood when she came through the door. She handed him the wire. She sat down at the kitchen island. She told him the terms. When she was done, the silence lasted about 4 seconds. 3 years, he said. And the compromised contacts? Yes. Sindy. Kim's son. You just ended a war, he said. Before it started. I ended it the way it needed to be ended, she said. Without you having to become something worse to do it. He crossed the kitchen and stood in front of her, and she looked up at him, and she saw it fully this time. Not just the piece she had glimpsed at the window that night, but something beyond it. Something that looked like a man who had built a fortress around himself for 20 years and was, very slowly, beginning to understand that fortresses have gates, and gates can open, and the world that comes in does not have to be the same world that once burned everything down. He lifted her chin. He looked at her the way she imagined he had never looked at anyone. I need to tell you something, he said. Tell me. When Ty was still inside the organization, when I still didn't know, there were 2 days where I thought the breach might be irreparable. That Baek had enough to dismantle everything. He paused. I spent both of those nights thinking not about the syndicate. Not about the ports or the contracts or the network. What did you think about? She asked softly. You, he said. Getting you out. Getting you somewhere safe. Somewhere that had nothing to do with any of this. I don't want to be somewhere that has nothing to do with this, she said. I want to be here. With you. In all of it. He looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said. That's the part that keeps saving us. I know a place, he said. On the coast. My sister used to say it was the only place in America that smelled like home. The mention of Hannah sat between them gently. Then that's where we go, Sindy said. The coast was everything. 7 days of salt air and mornings that started slow and evenings that had nowhere to be. Kim's son, freed from the black suit, wore linen and let her pull him into long walks on the sand with the kind of gentle persistence he never resisted. He talked, more than she had ever heard him talk, about Hannah, about Seoul, about the boy he had been before he became the man he was. She listened the way she had learned to listen, completely, without rushing toward the next thing. She told him things too. About the years with Fury that she had never said out loud to another person. About what it had cost her, not just the visible things but the invisible ones, the confidence she'd had to rebuild molecule by molecule, the mornings it had taken everything she had just to recognize herself in the mirror. He listened the way she listened. Neither of them tried to fix what the other said. They just let it exist between them and found that it fit there, that their separate griefs were not incompatible but complementary, 2 people who had survived different fires and ended up in the same rebuilt room. On the 5th night they sat on the porch watching the ocean go dark, and Sindy thought about the woman she had been in that mall hallway. Shopping bags scattered, wrist aching, the horrible familiarity of Fury's grip. The woman who had stood frozen in the blue light of 42 screens. The woman who had sat across from Baek Joon in a financial district restaurant and negotiated the terms of a war's end with steady hands. Same woman, she thought. Every version of her. What are you thinking? Kim's son asked, not looking away from the water. That I don't regret any of it, she said. Even the terrible parts. Because the terrible parts are what made the rest of it make sense. He reached across and took her hand. The same gesture as that night at the window. Open, unhurried, a question she had already answered. Hannah would have loved you, he said quietly. The gift of that sat in her chest like something warm. Tell me more about her, she said. And he did. For the rest of the evening, until the ocean went fully dark and the stars came out over the water, Kim's son talked about his sister. He laughed twice, real laughter, unguarded, the kind she had worked toward for a year and a half without knowing that's what she was working toward. She stored both sounds away carefully. On the last morning, before they drove back to the city, Sindy stood at the edge of the sand where the water came up and touched her shoes. She thought about what she was returning to, the estate, the surveillance room, the 42 screens and the red map and the empire her husband maintained from a hidden floor beneath their home. She thought about the syndicate and the seat she had taken at that table. The men who now looked at her directly. The deal she had closed across from an old man who had spent 11 years building toward a war she had ended in 40 minutes. She was not the woman from the mall hallway. She was not the woman from the hidden room, trembling in the blue light. She was something the story hadn't had a name for yet. Something that was being written in real time, one choice at a time, one door at a time. She realized, standing at the edge of the water with the morning light on her face and her husband's footsteps coming up behind her, exactly who she had always been capable of becoming. She just needed the world to run out of ways to stop her first. Kim Sun stopped beside her. He looked out at the water. He said nothing because nothing was required. She took his hand. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she said. And they turned, together, unhurried, unafraid, back toward everything that came next. Sindy didn't just become the syndicate queen. She became something rarer. A woman who looked at the full truth of her life, all the danger, all the darkness, all the impossible choices, and said, "This is mine, and I am not running from it." And the empire. The empire had never been stronger. She stood at the edge of the water. No fear. No running. No looking back. Just Sindy, hand in hand with her husband, choosing her life. All of it. The empire, the darkness, the love, and everything in between. That is not the ending of a woman who survived. That is the beginning of a woman who won. And can we just take a moment? Because look at how far Sindy has come. She walked into this story with bruises on her wrist and shopping bags scattered across a mall floor. And she walked out of part 2 closing deals that grown men were afraid to sit across from. Negotiating wars to a close. Finding a traitor inside a fortress. Standing at the ocean like she owns the horizon. Because she does. That is what happens when a woman stops surviving and starts deciding. Now listen. I need you to do 3 things before you leave this video. Number 1. Hit that like button. Right now. Don't wait. This story took everything to write, and your like is how you tell me it was worth it. Number 2. Subscribe and turn on your notifications. Because part 3 is already taking shape, and I promise you, the Queen's next chapter is the one nobody sees coming. There are people from Kim Sun's past that we have not met yet. There are cracks in the empire that Sindy is going to have to hold together with her bare hands. And there is a secret about Hannah that is going to change everything you thought you understood about why Kim Sun built his fortress in the first place. You do not want to miss it. Number 3. Drop a comment. Tell me where in the world you're watching from. Tell me your favorite moment from part 2. Tell me if you saw Tai coming, because honestly, did you? And tell me this. White right pointing backhand index when Sindy sat across from Baek Joon. Were you holding your breath? Because I was holding mine writing it. Share this story with someone who needs to see what a woman looks like when she stops apologizing for being powerful. Share it with someone who loves dark romance with real depth. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the most dangerous thing in any room is a woman who has already survived the worst and chosen to stay anyway. Sindy's story is not over. It is nowhere near over. The syndicate has a queen now, and queens don't retire. And comment this, are you Team Sindy from the beginning, or did she have to earn it? Part 3 is coming. And I promise you, the Queen is just getting started.